Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any grant law statements or positions, so make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, we love seeing you live every Thursday night in Facebook and YouTube. The chats are always fun. We can't get to every chat, but remember your chat may show up on the air. And if you can't catch us live, please catch us on the replays or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, I'm John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Jason, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Awesome. Jason Richards here, past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio as well. Glad to be here.
Woo. Awesome. And Joe, good evening and hello.
Hello and good evening. Am I moving? Okay, sorry. I'm on hotel Wi-Fi. Joe Martinez. Man, I got to fix that headline. Let's see. Once again, and for the last and final time, Worshipful Master of Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia, member of Things and Stuff, and as always, damn glad to be here.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yes.
You set your watch to it. And last but not least, the Wizard of Arch.
Hey guys, happy to be here and excited about this cool topic. One that I think we've danced around quite a bit. Also, Joe, you said the same thing the last time about being master, that
This
it was like
totally my last time.
Yeah, I did, huh?
Oh.
Yeah, I count on you to always highlight my faults and foibles. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Just
and we'll talk about it offline.
Remember that one time?
Keeping it on the real,
Technically, in our
it's
latest
legit.
Resolutions,
it's his fault.
In our latest resolutions episode from a couple weeks ago, I did not resolve that Joe would be master next year.
We're good. Yep, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
But you can pick new resolutions year-round.
Anytime.
No, you can't.
And so
No,
I
can't.
resolve on January 30th, 2025, that Joe will be master again next year.
I like it.
I think Joe will eventually end up not in Virginia, and he will be the master of whatever lodge he starts attending the second year he starts attending.
Is that because he'll
like,
be warden the first year?
Good God, no!
It'll be awesome.
We must have some off time.
He'll be warden the first year. Yeah.
Lord, show up, throw an apron on. We're not going to talk about this anymore. Let's talk about our patrons, please, John.
Let's do that.
Yes.
Or we could go back and talk about your year.
Let's
years
not.
In the East. Okay. Patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable. We are at TMR episode 499.
Woo!
That's amazing. So all thanks to the patrons who support the show because we have hosting costs. So without that, you guys wouldn't have all this Masonic education. So thank you very much from the bottoms of our hearts. We love you.
We do. Totally love you.
Yes, we do.
Love and love.
You know what else we love?
What do we love, Jason?
That time.
I know what
Tarot card of the week.
We do not love Tarot card of the week.
Oh,
There was a time you did.
That's true.
Yeah.
There was a time. All right. Tonight we're doing the Sacred Geometry episode. So we're going to a Sacred Geometry Tarot deck. This is the Orbifold Tarot.
Where'd you get that?
Off of eBay because it's been out of print for years.
Oh.
So if you can find it, snatch it up. I think it's pretty cool. One form, four elements, infinite possibilities, patterns and change, chaotic rhythms, endless cycles. The Orbifold Tarot. This is an interesting deck because it's built around sacred geometry, the 4 elements, and not a whole lot else. So this is not a beginner's type of deck, but it is super cool how they arranged the shapes together. And so here we go. This is my favorite card in the deck.
Oh crap! Oh,
Death.
I always find the death card really exciting. I think the people
transformation.
Change.
My favorite iconography of the death card is definitely on the Paul Case deck, which is very much similar to the A.E. Waite Pamela Coleman Smith artwork. But this is good. I like it.
Yeah. So 13 circles. Yeah. Really cool. Almost like a chrysanthemum type of.
A what? Say it again?
Chrysanthemum?
Oh, okay. Thought you were having a John moment.
No, I said it correctly both times. It looks like a flower. Okay. Goodness gracious.
So it's a shame, like, since it has the 13, next time we'll do the 13 Archimedean solids.
Oh yeah.
There's like, besides you guys, there's like 2 nerds somewhere out there listening, going,
yeah.
Oh,
here's another death card for you.
Yes,
that's a fun one. Yeah,
there it is. Yeah, I love it because it's got the pieces of people on the ground. Yeah.
You'll also notice that it's it's Smith-Waite symbolism with Tarot de Marseille coloring.
Well, it's got a little Dia de los Muertos flair. It's got a little Mexican skull there, a
little je ne sais quoi.
A little je ne sais quoi in Espanol. Love it.
So death doesn't mean physical death. Doesn't have to mean physical death. It means change, transformation, rebirth.
Yep.
All good stuff.
As
in the
Paul TMR 499 is, an episode before change, before 500. I don't know how much we're going to change or if at all.
The Paul Case deck has the sun in the background, right? With the understanding that it could be rising or setting. Yeah, so it's really cool. Oh man, look at that! That's a margarita pizza, baby. Look at that.
That is the best margarita pizza AI can conjure up.
Well, that's okay. It's looking good to me.
It's not trademarked.
It's only got 6 fingers.
So what are we doing, John, next week?
Well, I guess we should celebrate episode 500, right?
Yes, we will.
So let's do it in person.
Let's do it in person.
Since some people are in town for Masonic Week, and we'll all be in one place at the same time. Coming over to Manasseh Lodge, number 182, and get some free pizza.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get some swag. Get some RJ. Get some Jason. Get some John. Get some special guests.
Let's be clear, though. There will be, for me, it's just an iPad on a Segway.
the mobile RJ.
With a shirt on a hanger.
This is going to be super cool. What's not to love, right? Pizza, fellowship, doing some episode 500.
Restored internet connections,
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. I'm not going to name the hotel chain I'm staying at, but their internet connection is quite atrocious. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Come and hang out with us. Starts at 7 p.m. We'll hang out, have food. It said it started. It starts at 8 p.m.
Oh,
Right.
I'm in the Central Time Zone. Yeah,
You're
good
in
call.
CT.
Good call.
Yeah.
8
So it
p.m.
starts
Eastern.
at 8
8
p.m.
Eastern.
Eastern. We will have food and fun. We'll have some giveaways, and we can
Mhm.
all settle in.
Yeah.
9:30, we will go live. It'll
Yeah,
be great.
pick up,
And
put the kids
stay on
to bed
Facebook.
and come out.
Yep. And
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off there, RJ. If you're in
No, you're
town
not.
for Masonic Week, it is less than 30 minutes away. Okay.
Yeah.
So pop on over. If you're done buying the swag, wearing the green jacket, seeing all the peoples, come on out for a couple hours and then watch us do the show live. It'll be good fun.
We're
And,
not going to tell
yeah.
you to skip whatever they have going on Thursday night. Let's
But yeah,
skip whatever they have going on Thursday night. This will be better.
There you go. There you go.
Look, if it's a banquet, the pizza's going to be better, and
Pizza
free
will
is
be
a
better.
lot cheaper.
that's
Then,
true.
yeah.
So
Hotel food. Yes.
yeah,
Nice.
And you've got us.
Undercooked chicken.
Green beans.
Yeah.
All right,
rather
let's get
have
to it.
undercooked or overcooked chicken.
So Thursday night, the only things that are happening are like mega obscure things that cost lots of money. So
There we go.
And you probably can't get into them anyway, so come on
Masonic
out.
Order of Bath, Masonic Order of Pilgrim
The
Preceptors,
Order of the Rusty Sword. I don't know.
Masonic Order of Atelstan, and the only guy I know who might be in that is Don McAndrews. So Don's
So
in-
yeah, Don
McAndrews is in everything.
Don's been
Don
the head
is-
of everything.
Yeah, you don't see when it's Masonic Week, you don't see Don, alumnus of our show. You don't see Don from like Monday until the following Monday. Like the man is just there the whole week. So yeah, busy boy.
We should kidnap him and bring him to Manasseh.
He probably wouldn't mind.
I'm sure.
True.
Oh darn.
Oh darn.
Oh darn! Where did he go? He tripped and fell into my car.
Let's talk about the Platonic Solids.
Yes.
Yay!
Let's talk
I
about
love it
platonic
when
solids.
solids can be friends.
Yes.
Just platonically.
Just platonic.
So this will be fun.
Yeah.
Because depending on jurisdiction, you may have some introduction to Platonic Solids in your ritual. In some places you may not.
Mhm.
But there is a Masonic connection, and we'll learn a little bit more about the symbolic, philosophical, spiritual connections that are related to the Platonic Solids and how to be more awesome because of them. So let's get into the history of where these things go. Joe, did you?
Yeah.
What happened to your arm?
I have them on my arm. So I have the 5 platonic. My arms are busy. I can't do anything with my hair anymore. So we gotta accessorize in other ways. But yep, got the Platonic Solids here. Big shout out to brother Charlie Berger, who is a Mason in Virginia, also a tattooist, awesome tattooist. He'd be a cool dude to have on the show. He is deep into symbology, knows all the things.
We've had Charles on the show.
That was before Joe, right?
Oh yeah, that was BJ.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, BJ before
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah.
Awesome brother. Yep, awesome. I love him very much. But yeah, so
Oh,
let's
look at
talk
you.
about. Oh,
Is that your
look at that.
D20? What is that? Your dodecahedron?
That's my dodecahedron. Yeah.
I only have this.
Roll for Constitution.
I
Oh.
have this really cool set of Platonic Solids
Oh,
that
look at that.
Yeah,
I think
got
they
something
sell
similar.
this at the George Washington National Masonic Memorial. But I think I got this, and if it wasn't this person, it was somebody else. It's not like I forgot. I have a lot of stuff. I think I got this from my worshipful master Rob Wingeter after he left the East. Look at you. Yes, that's awesome. So I have a purple set. You've got green.
Yeah.
You're like the Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, the star tetrahedron, which just looks like a big X because it doesn't actually like stand up by itself on the plate.
Uh-huh.
But it is
Yeah,
what
on a
it is.
little plate. I love it.
Well,
wait
So
a
what are
second.
these things?
Star
Oh,
tetrahedron is not a Platonic solid, though.
No,
yeah,
this
but
is.
they sell those sets and you get extras. Like I got one with a sphere.
I mean,
It's
it's
a bonus track.
still here, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
got you.
it's,
Okay.
it's
All right, what are these things?
Number
Let's
6.
get to it.
let's
Where
talk
do we
about it.
first find these?
Shapes
Yes.
Plato invented, right?
No, they are not. That is wrong. So, just like with all things in history, there's been revisions and innovations. So yeah, what are the Platonic solids? And Jason, bring up your picture because it's cooler and I like it. But so the Platonic solids are 5 polyhedra, right? And they are shapes where all faces are identical and regular polygons, okay? And all the edges and all the vertexes or vertices are identical in structure. So there's 5 Platonic solids. Used to start with 4 if we want to talk about the elements, but traditionally there's 5 Platonic solids. The first one is a tetrahedron, and it's got 4 faces, 4 points and 6 edges like it says, and all the faces are equilateral triangles. Then you've got the cube or the hexahedron, and that's got 6 faces, and all 6 faces are squares. Then you've got the octahedron, which is 8 faces, and every single one of those faces is an equilateral triangle. Then you've got the dodecahedron, which is 12 faces, and every single one of those faces is a pentagon. And then finally, the icosahedron, or the 20 faces, or the D20, the 20-sided die, and every single one of those faces is an equilateral triangle. So that's what they are. Now, I know RJ said it jokingly, but the Platonic solids in some form were named after Plato. We call them after his name, but they existed way before Plato came on scene. Okay, so people knew about these shapes, and I think if you do a little bit of searching, there's actually some really good links on that Wikipedia article, actually. So the article itself is meh, but a lot of great links, which I know John loves to point out. But they've done archaeological digs, and they found carved stone dodecahedra, and they found carved hexahedra and carved octahedron that go back probably at least 2000 BC. So your new Stone Age people, your Neolithic Age people had an understanding of geometry and things like that. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight is the geometry of this all.
Which is wild. So because these are the Platonic solids, I think something that as we explore this, right, we're looking at a shape, a polyhedron that has the same shape can be connected so that the vertices, basically everything is equal, and you can blow it up into 3 dimensions. And some people might go, well, you can't just keep adding to it. And there's an exception to that we can cover later. But what's really interesting is when you compare this to, let's say you start with something like a pentagram, then you continually, like on a 2-dimensional, on flat land, right? This is like Carl Sagan used to talk about flat land. Nice. So on flat land, right, you see like a stop sign. Then you can add another side, and then another side, and eventually you just keep going closer and closer to a perfect circle, right? As the sides get shorter and shorter, and infinitely close to that. But there's seemingly an infinite number of sides that you can continue to add to something in 2 dimensions. But when we put it into 3 dimensions, it can only be exploded so far until and then there's 4th dimensional, like the hyperoctahedron. But this is
what I find fascinating. Yeah, what I find fascinating here is that there are other ways you can connect geometric shapes to form these 3-dimensional items, but you'd have to like mix and match like some hexagons with some pentagons and some triangles to make them all connect. But mathematically, only these 5 and only these 5 are the ones that have the identical shapes, touching all sides, touching all vertices. So I think that's fascinating. And they discovered that, 300 years BC, right? So that's,
which is weird, right? Because they couldn't figure out the wheel.
Upwards of 2,000 years.
Well, and that we're just stepping right into mathematics and geometry and things like that. But again, we got to get past the Plato part of it, right? Because Plato was a very late addition to this story, right? If you go to the schools of Pythagoras, and Pythagoras himself, he talked about these solids, in the context of mathematics and harmony. When we talk about the 7 liberal arts, harmony, music, that kind of thing. So that was definitely taught in the schools of Pythagoras. Plato came on scene, almost 100 years later, right? 80 years later when Plato come on the scene. And they came up because he did mention them in one of his writings, right? So we've got Plato's Timaeus. That's where he also talks about Atlantis and stuff like that. But Plato was the one that actually took these 5 solids which were the only 5 original forms of solids, right, according to the ancient Greeks. And this is where it gets fun for John and Jason and people like that, where he links these solids to, the 5 elements, the
Right.
original 5 elements, right? So
The
that's where
original
that
4
happened.
plus 1.
4 plus 1,
Yeah.
right?
The all, right?
But before we talk about that, when we start to actually get really mathematical with it, is when we get to Euclid, who was about 100 years after Plato, right? About 70, 80 years. But he proved, through mathematics and through the measurement of angles and things like that, that these were the only ways to construct these solids that had the same vertices and the same shapes on all of their faces. So, I mean, these became the cornerstones for geometry that we learn later in life.
I think also it's interesting to note a couple things. So, number one, the idea of Plato talking about the Platonic solids. So anybody who has if you seriously read in context Critias, Timaeus, I think Critias cuts off like mid-sentence, right? But Timaeus is all there, Critias is almost all there, and then the third book was going to be called Hermocrates. But in Timaeus, you have these cast. There's a lot of political stuff that he's talking about because he's really like ramping up Greece and stuff and how amazing it is. And they use examples, and he makes all these ties back to like analogies. And so he does talk about these Platonic solids, but he kind of uses them in some places as placeholders for like an analogy for a caste system within society. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But that's an aside note. Sorry.
One thing I found interesting. I was reading through a little bit of Timaeus earlier, and how kind of this concept came to be, right? Because again, this is like pretty early, mathematics and everything, but it started from like the Aristotelian forms, right? And so Jose he gets it that this is how do you express the material world based off of these forms, these perfect concepts of things. And the conversation that goes through these early texts really is try to walk through, okay, if we're not going to take 2D shapes because we live in a 3D world, right? So we need to come up with like the most basic, most foundational core structures that are 3-dimensional, and those are going to be our building blocks for the material world, right? And so they posited that basically once they walk through how these not only these forms came, but then what the classical elements they assigned to them, they said that's it. Like we already know about classical elements. Go see our other episode on classical elements, and now we've got these forms. There you go. These are all building blocks to life. This is exactly your new thing. And so they posited that all structure, like you and me and the building that we're in, all were started from these Platonic solids, and they were half right. But we'll get to that.
That's why you can't trust a Platonic solid. They make up everything.
Oh, good one.
Oh.
All right, a little bit more on the history, Jeff.
Well, I mean, that's the big one, but I think the one thing you touched on that I think we'll get into a little bit later is some of this, depending on how far back we go, was based on observation, like you said, and that changed over the course of thousands of years. So, when the ancients looked at things like crystals, natural crystals, things like pyrite and fluorite and garnet, people who've got garnet as their birthstone, salts, absolutely. They mirror the Platonic solid forms exactly, like there's no deviation, right? So they would look at things like that and like, oh, these are the building blocks, of everything. Then you go thousands of years later when you look at things like molecular biology and viruses. Viruses, interestingly enough, their core shape are icosahedrons, right? So then you've got from a microscopic level. And then you fast forward a little bit further when we get to things like quantum mechanics and physics and stuff like that. When you talk about things like string theory and things like that, we're using Platonic solid geometry to explain these things that come in fourth and fifth and sixth and 11 dimensions and stuff, which we can't visualize in our brains, right?
Sure.
So this is what I love that. And so the punchline for me is like, this is like, holy smokes, you can take these abstract ideas, assign these three-dimensional shapes to these concepts, and people years before microscopes and electron microscopes and everything else figured it out. Like, this is amazing that you had these big thinkers that weren't all scientists, some of them were philosophers, coming up with these structures that we only could visually see in the 20th century. Like, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it seems like something that you'd have to explore on Josh Gates or something, like it's, the Dogon tribe who seem to know that there was like, the twin stars and things. How do they know these kind of things so far back? And what I find, like I joked earlier, I'm like, yeah, we could construct these very complex shapes. I mean, but somehow the discovery and the manifestation of these shapes to the human mind somehow preceded the simple circle. You know what I mean? Like the wheel, which is kind of bonkers. You're shaking your head, Jason. Go ahead.
So I think I liken this back to like ancient geometry and how the pyramids were able to be constructed with such perfection. And I just think about how much knowledge have we lost due to time, that we are now rediscovering things that our ancestors knew thousands, if not tens of thousands of years ago. That was why I was shaking my head.
The lost art.
The historian in me is just like, but
are you still upset over the library in Alexandria?
Just a bit.
But I mean, I just want to touch on.
Never heal.
Well, and then we also lost. We brought it up last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Was it the Theosophical Society?
Yeah.
They're LA fires. They lost a lot of stuff there. So, everybody scanning PDF your stuff and throw it on archive.org, so it's there forever.
So when we get a global EMP,
yep,
we'll go back to the Stone Age.
Floppy disk.
Yes. Floppy disk won't survive an EMP.
Hey, don't you tell me.
Punch cards.
What were we talking about? Oh, so Platonic Solids. So let's
find the lie.
I want to go back to John, what you were talking about, and when it became really important in science, or what we consider modern science, because people who don't listen to our show or don't know how weird some of us are like, yeah, they're talking about Platonic Solids, big deal, like what's this all about, why is it so amazing and important? But you had these really big powerhouses that created modern science that truly believed that the Platonic Solids were the building blocks of the universe. Looking at like Johann Kepler, great example. He believed that he was an astronomer, he was a mathematician, and he created those 3 laws of planetary motion, which are still adhered to for the most part today, right? And that's going back into the 1500s, right? Super, super firm believer and a devout religious person, but his science was informed by the Platonic Solids and by the harmony of the spheres. He really believed in this concept of the harmony of the spheres, that everything was arranged in a certain way.
Well, religion and science were interlocked.
Isaac Newton, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wrote more about the Bible than he did about physics, So there were, but, we had this cosmography that's built all around Platonic Solids, which for the most part kind of holds true a little bit. You've got this geometry of the solar system, which back in the, the 15th and 16th century, 16th and 17th, sorry, really, really worked for people. So it's really interesting. I would say Google that on you guys' own time. You have to listen to us for the next 30 minutes. But Platonic Solids and Kepler's cosmography of the solar system, it's super, super interesting, and it works, and he can prove it with math,
Right.
which is the fun part.
Was it Kepler that had to like draw little loops to show when planets were in retrograde? Because they went backwards and they went forwards again?
I'm not sure, but I know stuff starts to degenerate once people start to realize it's like, holy crap, these aren't spheres, they're ellipses. Right. So
and it's not geocentric, it's heliocentric, and oh
yes.
Crap, all the math breaks down.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
fun time. I thought it was interesting while doing some research for the show. I picked up, I think I have a book over here somewhere. I think it's Morphic Resonance. But anyway, it references at a point in the book, talks about the search for a sixth Platonic solid, right? There's this idea that you could eventually come across this idea. The first candidate that a lot of guys were working with in the beginning, but has, some small intricacies that make it not exactly identical, was something as simple as the inverted cube. So this is the hyperoctahedron. It's so you basically no, the octahedron is what they came up with later. The other one is let me open up this link here, the rhombic dodecahedron. So it's it says if you take a cube and imagine its edges extended outward to create a new shape with the same symmetry, the resulting inside out Platonic solid would be a rhombic dodecahedron, a 12-faced shape where each face is a rhombus. So it's really interesting. It talked about that. And then later on, it goes into talking about, earlier I referenced Carl Sagan's Flatland, right? Well, within that, we live in three-dimensional space. And to really grasp how he's talking about experiencing other dimensions in space and time, it's almost incomprehensible for us to imagine a higher dimension, like fourth dimension.
Sure.
One of the things that he talked about was this idea of fourth dimension, and he shows the hypercube, and the hyperoctahedron is what they call the sixth Platonic solid, but it is only in the fourth dimension. It's a four-dimensional analog of the octahedron in 3D space. So really, really cool. But at the same time, you try to wrap your brain around this, and it's just like, total bonkers. Yeah. There you
go.
Like
watching Interstellar.
Yeah, this is the rhombic dodecahedron.
Okay.
And so that rhombic dodecahedron is interesting because if you follow a diagram on how the cube unfolds, you guys ever seen those really cool like circular Masonic watch fobs that like open up into like the cross? It's kind of what it reminded me of. But anyway, shapes are exciting.
They are. I love that you brought up Flatland, right? Because that is probably the best video I've ever seen to explain. Yep, Brother Jose, love it. If you've not watched it, go find it. It's on YouTube. It's probably 10 minutes long, right? 10, 15 minutes long. But, and he tells the story the whole time, but he really explains the differences in comprehension between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And, those of us who realize we live in 3 spatial dimensions and 1 in time, we can't wrap our brains around what these things look like in 4 dimensions. Like I think he talks about a tesseract, right, in Flatland.
He brings the tesseract. He goes, this is the tesseract, and then he shines a light, and he goes, the best representation of what we think 4th dimensional could be is not when I shine the light on this thing, the shadow of the thing.
Right.
And you just go, it's really fascinating. But the way he does describe it has a real value, I think, in looking at these Platonic solids and how they relate to the classic liberal arts and sciences. in that it really helps you appreciate the three-dimensional space that we live in and just how complex this stuff can be. When he tells the story of Flatlander, this guy who is flat, has no idea of up or down and gets tossed into the air. And when he comes back, his friends were like, "Where'd you go? You just suddenly appeared." And he's like, "I was up." And they were like, "What's that?
Up?
You're crazy."
What's up?
Yeah.
How much? What's up with you?
Yeah. But he does a fantastic job. And it's just one of his things. I digress. Sorry.
Well, and thinking back to like 3 dimensions into 4 dimensions, when we hear accounts of near-death experiences, something similar happens, because when people come back, if they've had some sort of near-death experience, they find it very difficult to put into words because they just can't. Like, they can't translate from an extra dimension to now 3-dimensional space, which is why you see a lot of depictions of angelic beings as having eyes all over the place. And what if that is a 4th-dimensional being flattened down into 3 dimensions?
This is something that you just said has like kind of echoed in my head forever about like the idea of ghosts. Could ghosts be 4th-dimensional beings briefly passing through the 3rd dimension, kind of like the apple slice,
right?
2 dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
Just super wild. Robert Marshall, the great, he said, where to go? The Flatland story sounds like a pretty obvious rehash of Plato's cave. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not so much philosophy as science.
Yeah.
I said
Plato's cave for Chase.
It's like a whole new dimension, man.
Yeah.
I was in another dimension.
So why did we have these classical elements assigned to the various Platonic solids, and they've been written down since, again, around circa 300, 360 BC. And they've kind of stuck that way. And then as time has gone on, people have started adding more symbology, philosophy, concepts to those, because we talked about some of the meanings behind the symbolic meanings behind the classical elements. So does that still hold true? And what are they? Right? So, like, could we walk through some of those?
I suspect so.
I think so. Where's that awesome picture you have?
Oh,
Share that again.
Let me.
As you started to talk about this, I remembered my Masonic tarot and the little book that it came with, and I just thought it was interesting, right? Because these Platonic solids relate to these elements, and then we talk about the trial of elements within certain branches of Masonry.
Yeah. But I mean, Plato does give a bit of rationale in the Timaeus, because the first we don't know if he came up with it, but the first documented explanation of the classical elements as expressed by the Platonic solids, or the solids. He probably didn't call them the Platonic solids. But Plato proposed. Yeah, right. It's kind of douchey, kind of. Yeah. But in the Timaeus, he proposed that the universe was composed of these tiny geometric particles, right? Before we understood the concept of atoms. And these fundamental building blocks of nature were constructed from these 5 Platonic solids. So he assigned each of the 4 traditional elements to a solid based on their physical characteristics, right? And then left this mysterious 5th solid, the dodecahedron, for the cosmos, or the divine realm, or the aether, that kind of thing. So, just like it says in the picture, it's pretty self-explanatory. The tetrahedron, 4 faces, it was given the element of fire. And he made this association because it was sharp, it was pointed, it was unstable.
Right. Exactly.
Like the flame. And
Like
then
Joe.
we've got like Joe. Joe is fire.
Sharp, pointy.
Much fire. Yes, yes. Then we have the cube or the hexahedron. 6 faces. It symbolized Earth. It was solid. It was stable. It was unmoving. Things like the land and the mountains. And again, these are Plato's words, not mine. So then the next one we come to is the octahedron, which was given the element of air because it was light, it was smooth, it was mobile. It was like the wind and the breath. And those are the attributes that he felt that were coming out of it. And then finally, you've got the icosahedron, or the 20-sided triangles. And he gave this the symbolism of the element of water because it was smooth, it was rolling and flowing. And then finally, again, you have this this aether, which was expressed by the dodecahedron, which has less faces, but it was to him, it was a more divine shape. It represented the spirit and the cosmos, and it was mystical to him, linked to the divine structure. So he does, if you read the Timaeus, he does give you rationale for why they were chosen in this way, and it's stuck for over 2,300 years.
And these are ideas that traditionally, so philosophically, of course, you could write tomes on each one. Scientifically speaking and mathematically speaking, these were so inspirational. I mean, granted, the first tetrahedron shaped like stone that was shaped by hand, right? Is they looking at the end of the Neolithic period. So these shapes have inspired the human intellect to think about these things over and over again, and the basis of building blocks. And you got these philosophers who start thinking about these things, and it almost becomes in a way, a forerunner to, you guys started mentioning quantum physics things. The grandfather of all that is Max Planck, right? Or Max Planck. And he was one of the guys who basically theorized that all energy is not continuous, but exists in these little packets called quanta, which were like, if you would kind of think about it as zooming in on something until you saw the pixels, the building blocks. And so very similar ideas, and it just goes to show you the brilliance of looking at something in terms of like these classic Platonic solids. It's really amazing.
I mean, you touched on, not to shy away from Platonic solids, but you touch on, you talk about, Max Planck, and that gets really off the deep end when you get to think about it, because what he postulated, right, that's basically the beginnings of quantum mechanics, right? And that's where we get its name from. But when you get down and talk about things like string theory, and that everything is vibration, when you get down to it, it really shows, going all the way back to Max Planck, that people started to figure out that energy and matter were basically different expressions of the same exact thing, right? And that's just, that's one of the big mind blowers, right? It's like, oh crap, it's all the same. It's just
energy is matter, energy is matter.
Which is interesting.
Because it's neither created nor destroyed, it simply changes form.
Love those thermodynamics.
Aristotelian forms or material forms?
Yes. Thought forms.
Nice.
So why do we care, John? Why are we talking about this?
There's got to be some Masonic connection, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it on the Masonic Roundtable. In some Royal Arch jurisdictions, you may see these be introduced as objects for contemplation and how it fits into that, which is interesting because I don't remember seeing that in Virginia.
It's not an American York Rite. It is not. So yeah, I believe, and somebody in the chat, please correct me. I think I've seen tracing boards or those big carpets, or the layout of Royal Arch rooms in, I believe, somewhere in the UK, where they actually take the Platonic solids and lay them out in the lodge room, or the chapter room, for the degrees themselves. I'm pretty sure it's Royal Arch in the UK. But again, if anybody in the chat knows different, please correct us. But you're actually told to look at them and, understand their symbolism and find, continue your searching, by using these Platonic solids. I wish we could look at the ritual or see it or get some more
So
context.
you need a
in that.
D4, a D20. This is what you need to have in order to
An
know
ogre.
yourself.
Yep, a sword, an ogre, and a dungeon. All those things.
But that being said, right? So we know they're tied to the classical elements, and if we go back to the classical elements episode, right? We have things to consider, right? The symbolic meanings behind these as well. So if you have, say, fire, right, for tetrahedron, that's unity, manifestation, creation, spirit, right? That fire, the spirit, right? These are all things that you should be considering as a facet of creation, of a facet of yourself. And so I think that's the big takeaway there. Not just that those shapes look cool, but really how to apply it, how to take it to heart. Right? The cube you talked about, the hexahedron was assigned to Earth because it was stable on all sides. So like, what is grounding you? What's firm? What's planted? What's rooted? Right? What's your grounding essence? Your personal development? Right? These are all little aspects of the symbolism of why we even care about these from a philosophical or symbolic aspect, other than the geometric side and the that kind of thing. So that's what I find fascinating about these is, yeah, you can do all the geometric and mathematical proofs that these things exist, right? You can tie those to the early known building blocks of life and chemistry, but so what, right? Why do we still care about these things? Because we've disproven these from a scientific perspective, right? 1,000 years later, 2,000 years later, but it's now taken on a new form of, what does it tell us that we should tap into these certain facets of our own development? So
Yeah, and no, absolutely, and I think, the most obvious one there that I'm sure we're going to touch on is every single lodge room everywhere in the world has a hexahedron sitting in it, right? Yes, we like to call them our ashlars.
What?
Yeah, yes, indeed. So
They're not always hexahedrons, though.
Well, they should be.
They should be perfect,
because
square.
otherwise it's not perfect, right? So yes, some people get lazy and go to the quarry store and get the rectangle.
I only see those in foreign jurisdictions where I go. I don't ever see those. Like, they're just not in lodges here in Illinois very much.
Every time you've been here, you've seen them.
Oh yeah, I know.
Got them. Yeah.
But
they also
really
show up.
good about stubbing your toes on them. Like, they're
Yeah.
really good for stubbing your toes.
Yes, or watching what my favorite is, appendant bodies, not noticing that they're there and just flopping right over them. Yes, down 3 steps. But they do show up quite a bit. If you look at artwork, if you look at some of the works of people like Pike and things like that, they show up in Scottish Rite degrees. You get different flavors of these Platonic solids. You've got things like the cube shows up in the 4th degree. You've got the tetrahedron shows up, when and you see those elements of fire shows up in the 9th and 10th degrees, southern jurisdiction.
And then you look at the decahedron, right, with the 12 faces, right? Then you have all the symbolism of the number 12, right? The 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 months of the year, 12 hours in the morning, 12 hours in the afternoon, right? So there's a lot of symbolism.
I thought it was 8 hours times 3.
There is no sleep for
not in this economy, buddy.
Robert Marshall brings up another good point. He talks about the craft degrees in the lectures when we talk about a point to a line to superficies to a solid. This is part of the there's a lecture on the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and then depending on your grand jurisdiction, you may have little or much more expanded version of this. But yeah, this is the portion of a lecture where we essentially charge a candidate to continue their education. And we have to understand that probably the time that this was written, what they're writing about is the gold standard of what education could consist of in a certain respect. And we're talking about the superstructure, as we say, of geometry.
Mhm.
The God is the grand geometrician, and that the study of geometry and all things therein contained within that, right, including these Platonic solids, calls us to sort of understand the language of God,
Yeah.
which is, I'm never going to get it all right. It's it's supposed to be this language, the architect's language, and this is almost a divine sort of science.
Well, I mean, I really like Robert Marshall's question. Kudos, man. You're on fire tonight. But I mean, yeah, I mean, for people who don't know what a superficie is, and I love the different ways that we pronounce it.
Superficie.
It's superficie. What did RJ say? How'd you say it? Superficies.
Superficies. That's after
post Taco Bell. Taco Bell, yes. Jinx.
Where
Owe
you
me a
mean
Coke.
Wow.
Owe me a Coke.
I got
Not a
you.
sponsor.
I got your Dunkin' order.
All right.
Yeah,
So
brother.
this episode's demonetized.
But so we said poop. That's all, and we use the sciencey word, so we're okay. But anyway, yeah. So for those who have not heard that lecture, you start with a 0-dimensional shape, right? We talk about a 1-dimensional construct. A superficie is a 2-dimensional shape, right? So it's more than a line. You've got a line, which shows basically 1 dimension expressed on a piece of paper, and then you've got a shape. So all the sides of those Platonic solids would be a superficie or superficie. And then you've got a solid, which is a 3-dimensional object.
As opposed to a super fist.
That's for later.
Chipotle-hedron?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Oh, man.
On that note, it's time to bring it home and give our final thoughts on the Platonic solids, what they mean to you, why are they cool, why are they not cool, what would you change, if anything?
I'll start.
Take it away, Jason.
So, have spent a lot of time contemplating the Platonic solids, especially in an alchemical sense within, the creation of the universe and everything in it. And so I did, I did flash my very unfinished sleeve, so please don't think that's the entire tattoo. Wanted to start with the Platonic solids to represent that the journey of creation of the universe, encapsulating the 4 alchemical elements, or the 4 classical elements, excuse me, with the 5th element of aether, or the void, everything else that wasn't covered in the 4 classical elements. And so it's always been, I think, a really fascinating thing for me to study. Just again, like Joe was saying, there were ancient philosophers who took the time to do the math and say, well, this is the lowest common denominator of anything that can be 3-dimensional. As such, it must make up everything. And so, yeah, I think it's just a really cool thing to study and learn about.
I love it. Joseph, you're next.
What? Okay, so Platonic solids. I'm hungry. I'm literally ordering Taco Bell right after. Not a sponsor. Right after this session, but yeah. So would I change anything? No, I don't. I think you leave perfect alone. But tying it all the way back to Freemasonry, our ritual, especially in the 3 craft degrees, we place this really important reverence on geometry, right, as that foundation of knowledge and the foundation of that order in the cosmos. And I think it's just important to note that for thousands of years we've had all these amazing people throughout history that basically show us that there's this order in the cosmos, and there's this order to understanding the things that are unknown, and it's geometry, and it's through the mathematical expressions of these symbols, right? So it shows us this order, and it basically unhides the rules of nature for us, right? Which is just an amazing concept to wrap your head around. So, like I said, for me, they're representations of our mankind's ability to reach further than we can see with the eye, right? And to place a little bit of science here and a little bit of spirituality here and mush them together, and you have a better explanation for the way the world is and what happens around you. So that's why I like them.
Right brain, left brain working together. Awesome. RJ.
Yeah, so picking these small, nuanced topics within Masonry, sometimes I think as somebody who does Masonic research and even for somebody who doesn't do it very often, could seem sort of labor intensive, but it doesn't have to be. I want to just say that, like, the idea of Platonic solids, and their significance to Masonry, for me, these really have their representations of perfection, harmony, and maybe even if you kind of follow that path to things like ancient wisdom. And because they are these perfect forms, these highly symmetrical geometric shapes, for me, again, they also symbolize something else that I think our ritual sort of calls to, and this idea of divine order. And they can be tied to philosophical teachings that emphasize, a lot of the things that we teach in Masonry, moral and spiritual development. I also think that as Masons, it's obvious that we value these things. In particular, we value a lot of geometry, but we're talking more of a myopic sense in this, just the idea of these Platonic solids. But, more broadly, we value geometry for its connections as a key aspect of Masonic instruction. These ideas, these are shapes that help us form and connect other ideas within the grander philosophy of Masonry. It helps us think about balance, proportions, and of course, these are also associated with classical elements and serve as metaphors for, different aspects of human experience and, of course, the universe. And if you follow it, then maybe even things like classical elements like earth, air, water, fire, ether, and how those might tie into your, other, we'll say, kindred sciences of Freemasonry. So these are perhaps a great example of, if we were to do a show on the gavel, this is another, to me, it's a philosophical and mindful tool. And I hope you guys dug the show. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. That's a good summary. I mean, yeah, there's not much I can add to what these other gentlemen have said, but I will, because we talk about sacred geometry, right? We start with, as Robert Marshall said, where we start with a point, and we start to grow that geometry into 2 dimensions and then 3 dimensions. And then we start now to evolve, right? We start to go to these multifaceted things, right? And the next logical conclusion, we talked about this tesseract and how, we can take these concepts and keep extending and applying them. And I just think that's fascinating. And how, from a sacred geometry perspective, you have the math, the spirit behind it, right? You have symbolic meaning with the numbers associated with those, and just you start to stack on these layers into a nice little little package that you at an instant can take that symbol and deconstruct that into all these different elements. And that's what masonry is all about, taking, you know, the symbolism behind things and packing things that could take, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of words and compressing that into one symbol, one form, one shape, or one of these Platonic solids. So hope you think about that. Hope you think about what it means to you, and, you know, learn a thing or two along the way. So that's been fun. We will see you next week for episode 500. So I'm looking forward to that. And what else? That's it. So thank you very much for watching. Keep searching for more light. Have a good night.
Wow.